Good morning, and thank you for joining us again today. We continue to be live streaming due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Sadly, 130,000 Americans have lost their lives, and there's a spike in infections in states all around the middle part of the United States, and fear of rises in other places. And so we prayerfully and hopefully are with you in the midst of this journey. Encourage everyone to do what you can to stay safe. Please wear a mask when you leave your home. Please wash your hands or sterilize them regularly. Change your clothes, wash them, do what you can to avoid spreading the virus. There's going to be a lot of churches that don't survive the pandemic. I hope ours is one of the ones that does make it. But that depends entirely upon those who watch our videos online to actually contribute to the church. I don't want anybody to get hurt in this, but if you can make a contribution, please do so. We don't sell eggs here, and we haven't struck oil on our property. The only way that we can support ourselves and keep going is if we have enough donations to do that. So please include us in your charitable giving. Thank you.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Oh, they're red, white, and blue, yeah. And when the band plays Hand to the Chief, oh, they pour the candle out of you, Lord. Now, it ain't me, I ain't no senator's son. It ain't me, I ain't no fortunate one, no. Some folks are born silver spoon in the hand. Lord, don't they help themselves, y'all? But when the tax man comes to the door, Lord, that house looks like a rummage sale, y'all. It ain't me, I ain't no millionaire son, no. It ain't me, I ain't no fortunate one, no. Some folks inherit star-spangled eyes. Oh, don't you send it down to war, Lord. When you tell me, how much should we give? Oh, they say this, that's a more. It ain't me, I ain't no military son, no. It ain't me, I ain't no fortunate one, no. It ain't me, I ain't no fortunate one, no. It ain't me, I ain't no fortunate one, no.
Please pray with me. In this brief juncture of history, we find ourselves living in the world's strongest nation. Our relationship with that power has not always been noble, and at times it has become a source of moral shame. Though the saints and prophets often express their real power and weakness, our fear and lust drive us to prefer military and economic dominance. We come together seeking a different way of living, rejecting all faithlessness and nationalism. May we become the world's leaders in compassion and tolerance.
Yeah, what is it good for? Absolutely Yeah, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again, yo. Good God, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me. Oh, I despise, 'cause it means destruction of innocent lives. Oh, means tears of thousands of mothers' eyes when the sons go out to fight and lose their lives. I said, whoa, good God, yo, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. Whoa, 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 Lord, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me. Whoa, it ain't nothing but a heartbreak. What is it? Whoa, friend only to the undertaker. Whoa, he's an enemy to all mankind. The thought of war, it blows my mind. War has caused unrest with the younger generation. Induction, the destruction. Who wants to die? I say now, whoa. Good God, yo, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it, say it, say it, whoa. Yeah, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me. Whoa, it ain't nothing but a heartbreaker. Whoa, you got one friend, the undertaker. Whoa, has shattered many young man's dreams, made him disabled, bitter and mean. Life is much too short, the precious is thin fight. War can't give it life, it can only take it away. I say now, whoa, good God, yo, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. Whoa, 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 Lord. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me. Whoa, it ain't nothing but a heartbreaker. What is it good for? Friend only to the undertaker. Peace, love, and understanding. Tell me, is there no place today? They say we must fight to keep our freedom, but Lord knows there's got to be a better way. Oh, good God, yo, what is it good for? You tell me nothing. Say it. Say it. Oh, good God, yeah. What is it good for? Stand it up. Shout it. Whoa. Whoa, whoa, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
This wisdom lesson comes from the 14th Dalai Lama. Most of us have been conditioned to regard military combat as exciting and glamorous, an opportunity for men to prove their competence and courage. Since armies are legal, we feel that war is acceptable. In general, nobody feels that war is criminal or that accepting it is criminal attitude. In fact, we have been brainwashed. War is neither glamorous nor attractive. It is monstrous. Its very nature is one of tragedy and suffering.
Winston Churchill did not say it exactly this way, but this is the popular form of the comment he made in Parliament. Democracy is the worst form of government except for all of the others. Ending democracy is inherently inefficient, it's wasteful, and this appears to become increasingly true the larger the democratic institution becomes. The last denominational church I served was fairly large, with several full-time staff members and many more part-time staff, and once a year we had to write and balance a budget that was a few $100,000 shy of $1 million. We had a very aggressive outreach program that involved building a Habitat for Humanity house every year and supporting the social services of a small village in Nicaragua, along with a lot of local poverty work. But we also had a very large board that was populated by a number of well-intended people who, if I may say, watched way too much television. They would insist upon adding or defending budget lines to our church budget so that we would have to send money to their favorite charity. We were a charity doing charitable work, but they wanted to use the church to send money to their favorite cause. They didn't necessarily love these charities enough to send their own money, but they loved them enough to gum up our budget writing process to insist that we send them some of the church's money. So while I was vociferously trying to defend the funding of a feeding center in a small village in Matagalpa, Nicaragua, so that 200 kids every day would continue to be fed, they also felt equally strongly about maintaining a no-kill animal shelter where 300 or 400 cats were being housed. This was one of a dozen line items of different people's favorite causes that had nothing in particular to do with the mission of the church. There were some red-faced arguments every fall as these bureaucratic ego battles took place, and at some point I would always get around to offering, look guys, if you just give me a line item veto, I can balance the church's budget in 5 minutes and put a whole lot of money into savings. They never had the wisdom to grant me a line item veto. We like democracy because we all get a voice. And even though we don't get everything our way, we usually get at least a piece of what we want. But when a lot of people get a piece of what they want, efficiency, thrift goes out the window. I never suggested that they go ahead and euthanize the cats, and anyone who says that I did is a damn liar. However, my sympathy for them became less and less as 16 years went by. But during that time, I also served on the boards of several community agencies, which included the United Way, Burrell Mental Health, and the Community Foundation, and I was often the minority voice as we looked at very big budgets of tens of millions of dollars and had to make decisions about which programs got funded and which ones might have to be scaled back. And again, these things get very personal, especially when it comes to mental health funding. If one board member is a recovering alcoholic, they want to defend every addiction treatment program tooth and nail. Another board member has a sibling in an assisted living housing program, and for them, every other program is expendable except for the one that takes care of their sibling. Still, mental health is generally underfunded, and writing that budget was like trying to spread a jar of peanut butter over 100 loaves of bread. And frankly, it wasn't all well thought out. Not to beat a dead horse, since I haven't been on that board for 15 years, but this is a photo of a part of the main campus of Burrell where we spent more than $30 million in building buildings that housed a lot of our counseling, psychiatric, and child treatment programs. It's built on some of the most expensive land in this part of the state, next to the Cox Hospital complex. After we built all this, we realized that fewer than 10% of the people who came to us for services lived anywhere near us, and many had to take several different bus rides to access services. 90% of our clients lived on the north side of town, where we could have bought land for about 1/10 of what we spent for this land. We could have put millions of dollars back into the services we deliver in mental health, been closer to our client base, while dramatically improving the property values and lowering the crime rate in a blighted neighborhood. And if this observation seems logical to you, let me also add to this dimension. Saying things like this is why I'm no longer on the board at Burrell Mental Health. I had my sacred cows in every program, and I could be, it's difficult for you all to imagine, but I could be hard to get along with when I felt like politics or favoritism was having way too much sway in how we allocated millions of dollars. And then when you start to talk about a really big budget, like a hospital or a university, I was always on the sidelines of those battles, but a lot of the decisions about vendors, construction, legal services, auditing firms, these contracts were sometimes granted in the midst of kickbacks, bribes, or revolving door arrangements that were very hard to prove, but were also pretty hard to deny. Some were so evil that they would have embarrassed a mafia boss. I could be more specific, but I'm pretty sure I would get sued if I said out loud anything about Cox Hospital granting multi-million-dollar contracts on the basis of non-competitive bidding from members of their board. Oops. Sorry, not sorry. And of course, while medical costs skyrocket, our local hospitals make the same prime real estate decisions that Burl made, which is a large part of why healthcare costs are so high. When you see a new building being put up in the Cox or the Mercy system, it's always on a major intersection on extremely valuable land because they're competing with each other for image, which is not what we're concerned about if you've, say, got cancer or heart disease. You're interested in good services, which could have been delivered on much less expensive property in a neighborhood that really needed investment. I get my primary health care from a group of doctors that only charge me $60 a month for everything, no matter how often I go or how much help I need. They are bright, professional, and caring people, but they lease office space on the bottom floor of a downtown parking garage surrounded by closed retail shops and empty warehouses. But because of that, my health care costs about 10% of what most people in this area pay. This is just not hard. It's just very unpopular. Generally speaking, the larger an institution becomes, the less efficient it is. Some of that is due simply to the complexity of scale, and some of it is due, you gotta say, to greed. Greed that always creeps in when a lot of money is changing hands. Just consider how our economy has been altered by the current pandemic. 40 million Americans, I think actually closer to 50 million Americans, have filed for unemployment. Many, if not most, small businesses will not survive this. And yet the top billionaires in our nation have seen their wealth go up by 50% in 3 months' time, exploiting government spending and the special demands of the pandemic. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and a lot of other nasty rich people whose names are not in the news as much are experiencing rapid wealth growth while tens of millions of Americans are headed for bankruptcy. That's how our economy works in a kind of cannibalistic form of capitalism. Whenever a lot of money is being moved, the big guys step in and grab the majority of it, while the working class is still lacing up their boots to go to work. Now, I don't want to go all Steve Ratner on you guys, but I do have a few charts, if you don't mind. This is just an average municipal government budget. I can't even remember which city this is from now, but it's similar to every other municipal budget you'd want to look at. The big blue section is the police budget. The big red section is the fire department's budget. And it shows you what we're talking about when we talk about defunding the police. Now, at least there may be other people that are more radical than me, although I'm radical enough for everyone. That should set the watermark for everybody, okay? But I'm not talking about getting rid of the police entirely, but most of what the police are called out for are incidents that could be better taken care of by a mental health worker, a social worker, the kind of people who could meaningfully respond to the kinds of incidents that the police are generally called for. But they're hardly present in a municipal budget because it's already taken up by the police and the fire department. every mental health emergency, every public acting out of an alcoholic or drug addict, and almost every domestic disturbance does not need 2 militarily heavily armed cops to show up. Amen. And in fact, more than 1,000 times a year, because we send 2 heavily armed policemen to those incidents, someone gets shot and killed. Save the armed cops for bank robberies or domestic terrorism. But as you've heard me say many times, that if all you've got is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. You don't need an armed cop to give traffic tickets any more than we arm meter maids to give out parking tickets. Most police shootings actually happen at traffic stops. Why don't we just stop making traffic stops? You've got their license number, just send them a speeding ticket. That's what they do in the United Kingdom, and they're so good at it that hardly anyone in England speeds anymore. I'm talking about you, John Churchill. When we're late, he will never speed up because the country is full of cameras and you will get a ticket. But when an institution gets this big, it has so much power, it has so much authority, the municipal government has tremendous difficulty in getting the budget cut to a more realistic and appropriate size in relation to the rest of the city's needs. This is a problem that will not be fixed overnight, and correcting it at all will require tremendous political will on the part of you, the voters. And as important as this topic is, as much as it's in the news right now, folks, we're not really here to talk about police budgets or mental health or hospital budgets. On this 4th of July weekend, I'm here to talk about the military budget. My previous illustrations were really just kind of priming the pump. I wanted to get you into a yes set so that you realize how right I am now and that I'll be just as right about the things that I'm about to tell you. Now, when you go from the city budget to the national budget, what you see is this amazingly complex problem. The federal government will move about $4 trillion this year, but just over half of that is not really income that politicians have the right to manage. Social Security and Medicare are self-funding programs. So it's deceptive if we try to talk about our budget in this way. You have to get Social Security and Medicare out of it. It makes a lot more sense if we look at it, if we're only considering the money that we actually have discretion to change. So it's horrifying to realize that military and veteran spending accounts for 70 cents on every dollar we pay in taxes. And, men and women, if this chart doesn't have your heart racing, the entire war in Iraq and Afghanistan were never in the budget. It was off-budget spending, trillions of dollars. The scandal reported by The Nation in 2018 revealed that when the Department of Defense was finally pinned down to an audit, the auditing firm of Ernst & Young finally reported that they could not complete the audit because there were hundreds of billions of dollars unaccounted for. 16,000 pages of acquisition and supporting documents had been destroyed. Please don't let that slip past you. This is not a matter of Hillary Clinton deleting thousands of emails about her yoga classes and her daughter's wedding. 16,000 pages of Pentagon budget and acquisition documentation was deleted, and the military lost hundreds of billions of dollars that they cannot tell you what they did with it. Now, you all know what it's like to lose money. You might get a refund check from your automobile insurance and you lose it and you can't get it reissued, or late at night you're out in the parking lot and while you're fishing for your keys, you drop a $10 bill out of your pocket. But this is what $1 billion looks like. almost a dozen pallets stacked tightly with $100 bills 6 feet high. How do you lose that? And then how do you lose that a few hundred times? The military-industrial complex feeds on the bloated military budget that buys airplanes we can't use, ships we will never need, and weapon systems that were designed to win World War II when we will never, ever fight another war like that. Last spring, in a broadly reported interview, Jimmy Carter talked about a conversation he had had with President Trump. And Trump was expressing his concerns about China's growing economic strength and their competitiveness in world trade. The 94-year-old Carter spelled it out for him. The United States is perpetually at war, and China almost never is. Carter said that the U.S., this is a former president, said that the U.S. is the most warlike nation in the history of the world, having been engaged in conflict of one kind or another for all but 16 years of our history. 244 years of American history, and we have only had 16 years in which we were not engaged in military conflict. China has not mobilized their army for 40 years. While we are losing hundreds of billions on military spending that we can't even account for, China is building airports, housing projects, wind and solar power generation, and investing in international trade. You don't see it around here that much, but let me just tell you, as an avid scuba diver, I'm in the Caribbean and Central America fairly often, and in every place I've visited, the place where you want to go buy groceries is a Chinese grocery store. They are all backed by government initiatives because the government of China is intending to spread their language, their culture, their citizens around the globe doing helpful things. While we build aircraft carriers that we will never use because if we tried to use them, they would very quickly be sleeping with the fishes. They're all just one drone strike away from being sunk, and every nation on earth knows it. That's why no one has any or is building any except for the United States. Now, it's not an accident that I'm bringing this up on the 4th of July weekend. We tend to talk about every single war we've ever been in as if we were fighting for freedom and independence. We say that every soldier deployed to the battlefield is fighting to protect our freedom. And folks, wishing it was so doesn't make it so. We invaded Afghanistan because there were Taliban training camps there, but the whole nation wasn't a Taliban training camp. In fact, the military targets there that had anything to do with 9/11 were relatively few, and we had them knocked out in the first 5 days. But we invaded, and we occupied, and we have been trying to figure out how to unoccupy them for 19 years, while the Russians evidently are paying insurgents a bounty for every American soldier they kill. But 19 years later, does Afghanistan pose a threat to our freedom? Do they have a threat to our independence? Is any member of our military over there fighting to defend our freedom? Of course not. Now, Dick Cheney spun up a case for invading Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. They posed no threat to us. Their military was the only counterbalance to the growing power of Iran, so we really needed for them to stay strong, but we invaded them. And what that war did was it increased Dick Cheney's Halliburton stock value by more than 3,000%. The real reason behind almost every war is not the noble stuff they sell in the media to recruit soldiers and to gain public support for the war. It is to enrich those who are, generally speaking, already rich. Trust me, Dick Cheney was not clipping pizza coupons out of the Sunday paper when his stock value shot up by 3,000%. If war were actually a noble enterprise, it would be illegal to make a profit off of it. And we would spare no expense to care for our wounded veterans. But as you know, the exact opposite is true. War kills the children of the poor on both sides of the conflict, and it enriches war profiteers. I briefly worked as a military journalist. I have stood on the training grounds at Fort Leonard Wood, and I have in my flesh felt the electric passion of young soldiers as they prepared for deployment. I know that they were willing to give their lives in service to their country in defense of the values that we claim to hold dear. But I am telling you, I had a very short career as a military journalist, 30 days, because I could see that these young women and men were being lied to. They were willing to die in defense of freedom, but they were being sent to give up their arms and legs, their eyes, their sanity for very cheap oil and the profits of Lockheed Martin, Halliburton, Boeing, and Raytheon. Folks, war is a racket in which noble young soldiers are killed for ignoble profit, and that, men and women, is a fact. And listeners, you don't have to write to me to tell me how angry you are at me for saying these things. I've been hearing it for 40 years. But the fact that you are angry does not make what I am saying any less true. I'm not being unpatriotic. War profiteers are the ones that are not being patriotic. And yet, for some reason, they never seem to pay a price in the media. As the Dalai Lama said, we allow ourselves to be brainwashed into believing that wars turn soldiers into heroes and that they make our nation safe for democracy. That simply is not true. American democracy is in peril, that is true, but not from the armies of Afghanistan or Iraq, neither of which have any way to even get here. But our democracy is currently threatened by Russian, Chinese, and Iranian meddling in our elections. But that is a war that our president has not only chosen not to fight, but he has publicly and privately encouraged both China and Russia to meddle in our elections so that he can remain in an office for which he is not qualified and which he has already disgraced for 3 years. Amen. What'd you say? Amen. I thought that's what you said. Here's the moral dilemma of our age. If we simply cannot afford to provide health care to our sick, education to our young, a living wage to our workers, then what the hell are we spending trillions of dollars to defend? I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a Department of Defense or Homeland Security. I'm just saying that these things are so big that they have dominated our nation's budget and robbed us of the things that would make America great if we just got our priorities in order. I love my country, but my government is a disgrace. I respect our women and men in military service, but I despise the people who send them into battle to profit from their sacrifices. I want to be one of the people who stands proudly at attention for our flag, but America is going to have to get its head straight about what it is that we are standing for. I'll close with a bit of trivia that may be news to some of you. We all know that our Statue of Liberty, that beautiful Lady Liberty, was given as a gift to America from France, but it was not given to us at the end of our War of Independence in the late 18th century. It was given to us near the end of the 19th century, and it was given to us to honor the liberation of African slaves. The whole association with immigration and the famous poem on the base of the statue, that came years later. The French gave us this monument to liberty because we had finally done the right thing and liberated our slaves. Now, What I'm saying about ethics here should be fairly easy to see. If you want to be honored and you want to be respected, do something that's honorable. Do something that engenders respect. Cut the military budget, give workers a raise to a living wage, make higher education as available to the children of the poor as it is now to the children of the rich, get jobs for the unemployed, and for God's sake, pay reparations to the descendants of those freed slaves for which Lady Liberty holds her torch high. Oh, and not that I watch football, because I promise you I don't. But I think we ought to give Colin Kaepernick a job in the NFL. And tear down some of those statues of Robert E. Lee and put up a statue of Frederick Douglass, or maybe even Colin Kaepernick for that matter. Celebrate some history that is worth preserving, or create some history that's worth remembering. It may be a symbolic gesture to take the Indian murdering Andrew Jackson off of the $20 bill and put Harriet Tubman's face on the currency. But you can't say that it's just symbolic. If it were just symbolic, we would have done it already. There's a reason why Trump has now decided to delay that change, and the reason is the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is a racist. Amen. Come on, America. You're better than this. Give me something to celebrate on Independence Day next year. And I have a lot more I want to say about this, as you can probably tell, but I know I've already taxed your patience and maybe even frayed your nerves. So I'm going to end with what I think was the greatest line out of the 9 different episodes of the fictional Star Wars movies. When Luke Skywalker crashes into the jungle planet of Tatooine. It was Tatooine, wasn't it? Surely I'm not the only one here. Was it? Well, it's in the Dagobah system. Anyway, he meets a tiny alien, and he says to him that he is looking for a great warrior. And the strange-looking creature he encountered was Yoda, whom he had come to find. But Yoda is quick to correct him. Wars not make one great. I want to be proud of a great America, but America is not now great. I can't vouch for whether it ever was, but I know right now that it is not, and there is no war that will make it great. So the ball is in your court, America. If you want to reclaim your honor, do something honorable. If you want to be respected, do things that make you respectable. End your ceaseless wars. Find a solution to racism. Bring an end to ignorance and poverty, and for God's sake, elect national leaders that you don't have to constantly apologize for. Nobody is perfect, but then I can't think of anyone who is as imperfect as our current president. Amen. Do better, America. Be better. Earn respect, and you'll have it. I'm a son of the South. I'm a natural-born patriot. You don't have to do a lot to win me back, but you do have to stop embarrassing yourself and start doing the right thing. Amen.
Big guns, you that build the death planes, you that build all the bombs, you that hide behind walls, you that hide behind this. I just want you to know I can see through your mess. Want you to know I can see through your mess. Done nothing but to build, to destroy. fathers of old you lie and deceive. A word war can be won, you want me to believe. But I see through your eyes and I see through your brain. Like I see through the water that runs down the drain. I see through the water that runs through your drain. Fasten all the triggers for the others to fire. Then you sit back and watch. When the death count gets higher, you hide in your mansion while the young people's blood it flows out of their bodies and is buried in mud. Ask you one question, is your money that good? Will it buy you forgiveness? Do you think that it could? I think you will find that your death takes its toll. All the money you made can't buy back your soul.
That you die and your death will come soon. I'll follow your casket in the pale afternoon, and I'll watch while you're lowered down to your deathbed. I'll stand over your grave to make sure that you're dead.
Come, masters of war.
You're the masters of the world.
Masters of war.
Folks, thank you for joining us. Hope that everyone will exercise every appropriate caution to stay safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands, sanitize surfaces, and keep at least 6 feet of distance between you and others that are not the immediate members of your family. And be sure and join us here next Sunday morning. When you go in peace to love and to serve. Thanks be to God.